needs to contact Fabian about any matter, personal or general, you can send an email to fabian@leedsne.co.uk, or you can phone his office on 249 6600, and this information and much more can be seen on the website www.leedsne.co.uk. Fabian, you were telling us about the knock-on effects, what economists call the multiplier effect, on Arup, a private engineering company with a highly respected tradition,
Yes.
losing work
Yeah.
because the school building programme had come to an end.
Yes.
And you said the Conservatives really need to understand the link between private and public. But we just heard Cameron a couple of days ago, or maybe it was even yesterday, saying he didn't like private enterprise being bad-mouthed. There was a bad odour going around of people propagandising it unfairly.
Well, look, we know that in all walks of life there are some bad people, but there are mainly good people. People who want to do a good job, want to do an honest job, and want to have decent relations with their customers and their fellow employees. So, we are all human, and we're not all perfect. We know that. So there are certainly people in business that do rip others off, and there are certainly people in the public sector that take advantage and fiddle their expenses or whatever it may be. But by and large, most people are decent and honest. So I think the idea that Cameron's trying to get across is we, the Conservative Party, think all business people are absolutely wonderful, and the Labour Party vilify and debase them. And I think that's absolute nonsense, frankly.
You mean the reality is somewhere in between?
Well, the reality is that not all businesses are honest and decent. Most are. Not all business people are honest and decent, but most people are. And they want to do a good job for their customers. And, nobody disagrees about this. I mean, the Labour Party, the Liberals, the Conservatives all agree that you have to have business and enterprise to create wealth and to create jobs. We all know that. And the taxes that are paid from the creation of wealth through enterprise and through commerce. And we are commercial people. We love trading. We love markets. Everywhere in the world you go, there's a market somewhere. Human beings love to trade. That's part of our DNA, isn't it? And so business is absolutely vital. We've had experiments in communism where the state owns everything, and we know what happens. It becomes totally corrupt and bloated and domineering and autocratic. We don't want any of that. So we want free enterprise, we want a free nation, and we want the freedom to do business and trade with each other. Nobody disagrees.
Well, yes, that's right, but we do live in a funny world. You referred to communism and state-owned organisations. Well, let's talk about one called Lloyds Bank PLC,
yes.
Which, but through a strange set of events, is partly public owned.
40%.
40% public owned. It's just been announced that they have losses. I think it was $3.5 billion.
Yep.
But nevertheless, because of the PPI issue.
Yes, the
mis-selling of
personal
personal insurance.
Yeah, the
bad health.
payment protection insurance.
Payment protection insurance.
Yeah.
And that's one of the causes of their losses.
Yeah.
But they're still giving bonuses.
Well, I actually met. Let me interrupt you, because I met with Ewan McCulloch, who used to work for Yorkshire Bank, is now the government relations manager for Lloyds TSB, and I met him just 2 days ago in the Commons, and we discussed these issues. And one of the things he told me was actually we never pay more than 10% of the annual salary to any member of staff in bonuses. And bear in mind, most of our staff earn between $19,000 a year and $30,000 a year. So, you're not talking about a vast amount of money there, not talking about the millions, doubling the salary of Stephen Hester, for example, at HBOS. RBS, I'm so sorry. So you're not talking about those kind of telephone number figures. And they think it's only reasonable that if they've done a good job, they're paid a bonus. But he told me that actually there won't be a lot of bonuses this year.
Well, that's fine until you think about other modes of employment.
Yeah.
Office cleaners, factory workers.
I agree.
Nobody pays them a bonus. For
no, they don't.
Harder.
And that's why I'd love to see more collective enterprises, more employee ownership enterprises, like Waitrose and John Lewis, for example. But there are many other examples where if you are the lowliest cleaner, you will get a bonus in terms of the share of the profits if your company's doing well. I think it's really important to reward people, even at the very lowest level, doing the most basic jobs that we expect to be done, cleaning and sweeping up and road cleaning and refuse collection, that if the companies they work for, if they're assuming they're private companies, do well and make a profit, a share of that profit is distributed amongst the employees, and that would be a great incentive.
Yes, that's fine. But let me bring you back
Yeah.
to the banks and bankers' bonuses.
Yes, indeed.
As I've been on holidays, you know, and I was forced to read the only paper that was available, the Daily Telegraph.
Ooh, poor thing.
Well, yes, it used to be a good paper, but not in my view, not
No.
in my personal view anymore. And there was an article there about banks and bankers'
Yeah.
bonuses, and it was headed something about the lynch mob is still angry.
Yeah.
And it started off saying there's a lynch mob mentality, and it was written in a reasonable fashion, but it did wind up by saying that this anger and attitude is prevalent and justified, and there ought to be
yes, it is.
legislation.
It's absolutely justified at a time when people are suffering. They're seeing their wages cut in real terms and in actual terms. They're seeing, you know, if you work in a restaurant, for example, I mean, my daughter works in a restaurant in London. She gets tips left for in cash. The management are now taking a percentage of those tips to cover the VAT increase. So the staff are paying the VAT increase, not the customers. Now, I think that's just basic exploitation. It's
But I remember going on to that. I remember Mandelson introducing some legislation to prevent that very thing happening.
Well, it's still going on, I can tell you. So either they're ignoring it or the legislation isn't tough enough. But back to the point in hand.
And I say, how does your daughter feel? Okay, she understands these people work hard as she does, but isn't it a sort of a thumb in the face that these bonuses are still being paid?
Yes, that's exactly the point, that you're paying, that we're seeing bonuses, especially in part state-owned companies like these banks, being paid to staff who are supervising a company that's losing money hand over fist. How can that be right at a time when others are seeing their jobs go or their wages and terms and conditions cut severely? It cannot be right. It offends people's, especially British people's, sense of fair play and justice.
Absolutely. And the problem is, of course, it causes a mood across the country. Well, why should I put any effort in?
Well, exactly. And if we're all in this together, as David Cameron says, then why aren't those bankers taking their share of the pain? And let me just remind your listeners that we're talking about somebody like Stephen Hester. It's unfair to pick an individual out, but actually he's a good example because, it's iconic in a way. This man earns £100,000 a month. A month. Don't you think 1.2 million a year is sufficient compensation and salary, plus all his other bonuses, but his other extras are not bonuses. Other extras like the chauffeur-driven car, the flat in London, all that stuff. Isn't that enough to do the job that we expect him to do to rescue the bank? Why does he need to double it?
If you want my view as an interviewer, in fact, beyond that point, his remuneration is the power and the kick from running a large organisation and getting things done.
Well, I would have thought the sheer sense of achievement of
Absolutely.
actually turning around the bank. And, he seems to be a decent guy, and he seems to be the kind of man we need to do this. And I hope he succeeds. I don't want him to fail. And if he succeeds, well, let's give him, some shares, or let's give him a reward for success, but not for failure.
Well, some listeners would say, well, why not just say thank you? Well, putting it back where it was.
Well, exactly. We could just say thank you. 1.2 million is perfectly adequate as an income, I would have thought.
Absolutely.
Why does anybody need to earn more than that? Even if you pay 50% tax on some of it. It's a lot of money.
It is indeed. We're talking about, how can I say, it's almost an if I rule the world situation and power.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the reality and people's imperfections and difficulties. Let's talk about one of the things you've been involved in, which is diabetes.
Yes.
Which somebody can be doing very well and have all the drive and doing things, and suddenly not suddenly, but they become aware that this strikes them down. And it is debilitating, isn't it?
Well, it was a blow 2 years ago when I first heard that I was diagnosed.
You yourself are diabetic.
Type 2. I went for a routine blood test at the local chemist's with my wife. Her blood sugar first thing in the morning after fasting was normal, 5.4. Mine was sort of 8 point something. And they said, you better go to your doctor. So I eventually did. I was reluctant, actually. But I went and I had the glucose tolerance test. And it established without doubt that I am diabetic. And then I sat down with my GP and he explained what it meant, what I needed to do, and how I needed to change my life and what medication.
Can we say to our listeners what exactly it means, diabetes?
Well, my doctor described it beautifully, I think. And here's his analogy. He said, imagine that your red blood corpuscle is like a little box, and that insulin is the chemical key to that box. And the insulin that your body produces through your pancreas puts the key in the lock, opens the door, and pushes the sugar molecule into the blood cell, so that you could then have the energy to carry on with your daily life, or any exercise, or your muscles to work and your brain to function. And what's happening is that the insulin your body's producing isn't quite good enough to unlock the door. So some doors are being unlocked, but some aren't. And so a lot of extra sugar is floating around in
So
your
it's not
bloodstream.
lack of insulin, it's the quality
It's
of
the quality of the insulin. Now, when you get to type 2 and you have to inject yourself with insulin, type 1, I'm sorry, when you're insulin dependent, that means your pancreas is not producing insulin anymore. So that's it, and you've got to artificially substitute that with insulin injections in order to get the sugar that you consume into the bloodstream to actually work and give you the energy you need to live your life. So I think that's quite a good way of looking at it. So my insulin's not really quite good enough. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. And the danger of too much sugar in the blood is that it clogs up the small blood vessels in the eyes and the toes and the
everything
fingers.
gets claggy.
Yeah, it gets sort of sticky and claggy. And a lot of it goes out through your urine as well, of course. But, you know, and so you cut down on the sugar. You need sugar to survive, but you want a sugar that's slow release. So like carbohydrates and certain starches, oats being a good example, you consume them, and the sugars that are produced from those carbohydrates, metabolized in your body, do so a bit at a time over a longer period of time. Whereas if you eat, say, a sweet biscuit or a cake or icing sugar, you get a sugar high, it goes straight into your bloodstream, and then, in my case, it won't be properly absorbed, and then, of course, you come down again from that, your energy levels drop pretty rapidly.
And there's a lot of people affected by this, aren't there?
Yes, there are. I mean, more than you might think.
They say a new one, the Diabetes UK, the sort of organisation concerned with this, says a new person diagnosed every 3 minutes.
And that's just the diagnosis. That's the diagnosis. That's not the that's not the people who've actually got it. A lot more people have got diabetes without knowing about it. And my doctor said to me, I wouldn't expect you to walk through my surgery door for another 10 years with any symptoms, and I'm in my mid-50s. So, you know, mine's inherited. Both my parents had it. It's in the DNA.
And does it affect one's performance, do you think?
It can do. I mean, I think the crucial thing is to eat regularly at regular times, and to stop consuming the vast amounts of sugar that we all consume.
As always, Fabian, you've left us with something to think about. We have to bring it to a close there. You've been listening to Meet Your Representative. I'm Ronnie Millett. Our producer is Jeffrey Schiffeldrin, and this is Radio JCOM, broadcasting on 1386 medium wave and on the internet at www.radiojcom.com. Fabian, once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.